Hello there everyone, it is Toby from TIJ Music and welcome to a new video. Today it's time for another album review and today we're going to be reviewing one of Neil Diamond's lesser albums, let's just say. Let's not get too prejudicial just yet, we'll learn more what I think throughout the review, but today we're going to be reviewing Neil Diamond's effort from 1979, September Morn. This is his 13th studio album, released a year after You Don't Bring Me Flowers in 1978. And it's fair to say it's critically, expected, acclaimed maybe, that since Beautiful Noise in 1976, Neil Diamond was very much on a downward slope. We had I'm Glad You're Here With Me Tonight in 77, You Don't Bring Me Flowers in 78, and for many critics, this is seen to be the low point. So I'm going to look today and say, well, is it really the low point of Neil Diamond's career? We'll review every single track, look at the quirks of the album, and ultimately give it an overall rating. So, the title track, September Morn itself, became quite a big hit. Became Neil Diamond's 30th top 40 hit in the US. Went to number 17 in the Billboard charts, number 2 in the Adult Contemporary charts. The album went gold in the UK, which it means it sold 100,000, and went platinum in the US, so it sold 1 million plus. And one thing that's important to note, which I'll cover a little bit more later on, is it's the first album since Stones in 1971 to include what I would call a plethora of cover tracks. There are a few covers on the likes of I'm Glad You're Here With Me Tonight, but this album has probably got half of the tracks are covers. If we look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, I think there's 5 covers here. And Stones had about 4 or 5 covers as well. I think he actually had 6 out of 10 covers, because I Said, the reprise, of course, was one of the tracks. But we're not here to talk about Stones today. We are here to talk about September Morn. So the tracks are September Morn, Mama Don't Know, That Kind, Jazz Time, The Good Lord Loves You. I'll show the inner sleeve on the screen here. And then on side 2, Dancing in the Street. Yeah, that one. The Shelter of Your Arms, I'm a Believer. The Sun Don't Shine. The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, sorry. The Sun Ain't... Yeah, I thought it said Just then, because it's a weird A. And Sagar Lee. So let's get straight into it today. There's not much background to this album because, you know, it didn't do very well. As I say, it was really panned by critics, as Neil Diamond has always been. So for us Neil Diamond fans, that's not really a surprise. But I think they might well have record to be just, you know, they might have justification in this case. But we'll take it by track view. I'm not going to just say, well, this album's terrible because of this track and this track. We'll look at every single track, as I do in all of my reviews. I look at every single track, rate the track out of 10, and then give an overall rating at the end. So let's get into the first track, which is the title track to this album, September Morn. And this really, you have to say, is a 10 out of 10. It's one of Neil Diamond's best tracks, period. Overall, whatever you want to use there, whatever phrase you want to use. It's an excellent story of a couple who get back together after they have a break. And really, this is just what Neil Diamond does best. He writes fantastic story songs. I was watching, it is actually Neil Diamond's 80th birthday today as I record this. And this morning I've been watching an excellent programme called Neil Diamond at the BBC. And just so many good tracks. September Morn wasn't featured, unfortunately, but you can just tell in a lot of his songs, incredible stories he told. And, well, told? He's not gone yet. And storytelling, as I say, is one of Neil Diamond's big strengths, and it's really shown here on the title track, September Morn, and it's one of his treasures. And I picked up this album probably about 18 months ago now. I started my record collection about 18 months ago. I wanted to pick up the Neil Diamond albums. This was probably one of the last ones, but I thought, oh, I like September Morn, the track. I don't know about any of the others. I haven't really listened to much else on the album, which obviously has since changed, or else we wouldn't be doing an album review today. But I did think, is it going to be a little bit like those 80s albums where you have said songs, so September Morn here being the title of the album, and that's the great track, and then the rest is just filler? Well, let's go and find out. So track 2 on this album is called Mama Don't Know, and this is a 7 out of 10, I would rate it as a 7 out of 10. It's like many tracks on this album, it's a bit of a strange one. I can't actually tell in my heart of hearts whether it's cringeworthy or it's good. It's okay at least, and I don't mind the track. It's a strange one. It almost tries to sound a bit too modern, a little bit like Headed for the Future did in '86. But lyrically, it's decent, and it is fairly catchy. It's just a bit strange. It's not quite Neil, and I think that goes for the entire album, really, in many ways. But I've put in my notes here, a guilty pleasure perhaps, and that's why it gets a 7 out of 10. Track number 3 is called That Kind, and this is one of the highlights of the album. It's a good track lyrically, but I have to say it's nothing more and nothing less than that. It's a good album track, and I'll leave it at that, basically. It's a 7 out of 10 again, another good track. The album starts pretty decently, you know. I'm going to talk about this when we come to the end of the review, but it starts quite well. You know, we have that sort of trajectory, it's very good, then it comes down slightly, and then we go to track number 4. And this is where we have the whee, and the album comes down terribly. Track number 4, Jazz Time. I've been kind here. I've given this a 4 out of 10. I don't even know how to review this track. It's, honestly, and I hate saying this because I'm a massive Neil Diamond fan, but today I wanted to challenge myself by reviewing this album because, I'm going to be honest here, this album has got some stinkers on it, and this one has to be the worst of them. And this probably has to be one of the worst tracks Neil Diamond's ever recorded. I'll give it a 4 just on the basis of the being just slightly, just a tidge, get it? Just a tidge, just slightly catchy. It's not great. It really isn't great at all. So the less we talk about that track, the better. But that's the first terrible track on the album. Now the next track number 5, which I've actually given 5 out of 10 in the rating, which is track 5, The Good Lord Loves You. And this is a track written by a country writer. I can't remember his name now, but he's a country writer. I suppose if I get the album out, it will show me what it is on here. And I've got side 2 out, which is awesome. Fagan. I think it's Richard Fagan who wrote this. And he has worked with Neil Diamond on a few bits and pieces before. But it's a half-decent track, don't get me wrong. It's not terrible. But it just doesn't belong here. It's just too tame for Neil Diamond. One of the problems I have sometimes with these love songs is that they're just too lovey-dovey. But what Neil always does when he writes love songs is he has a real hard-hitting, cracking piece of work, which he does. You know, with tracks like Love on the Rocks, September Morn, Hello Again. I could go, you know, Play Me being the obvious example. I could go and go and go and go on for hours on end. But this one, no, doesn't belong on a Neil Diamond album. After a good start to side 1, it's almost like we've got a bad scratch on the record. As I said, we've gone nicely, and then, whew, then kind of back up to some sort of normality with The Good Lord Loves You. But if, you know, let it ride, which is what's the previous track is, if that gets a 4, then I suppose I can afford this one to get a 5. We then move on to track number 6, and this really isn't well, I suppose it is just a coincidence. I've given this track a 6 out of 10, but we will end that at the next track, so it's not a 7 out of 10. And this next track, when I first heard it, when I listened to this record for the first time, I didn't really know what to think. This is Dancing in the Street, and it's that Dancing in the Street, the whole Motown Dancing in the Street that was rocketed to popularity by Marvin and the Vandellas in the 60s. I tell you something, it really shouldn't work. And it doesn't really work, but I'm not quite sure it's actually okay. If anything categorises what Neil Diamond's career turned into at this point, it's this. You know, it's completely out of place. It shouldn't be on a Neil Diamond album, but it actually works. It's not too bad. It really isn't too bad. You know, I almost think that this album could well have just been a contractual fulfillment. I've read a few reviews that state this, because surely Neil wouldn't have been stupid enough to put some of these tracks on this album. But, you know, maybe I'm stupid, though, to think it's good, because I think it's actually okay. It's nowhere near the original. The Marvin and the Vandellas version I'm talking about, that has to be one of the best tracks of all time. One of the best groovy, dance, disco, whatever you want to call it, Motown, Northern Soul. One of the best tracks of all time. But this isn't near that, but it's actually okay. And again, considering Jazz Time got 4 and The Good Lord Loves You got a 5, I'm going to give this a 6. So then we move on to track number 7, which is The Shelter of Your Arms. And this very much is going to have similar sentiments to The Good Lord Loves You. It's just too tame. It really is. No one writes tracks like Neil, and this album really suffers from a lack of self-penned stuff. Now, what I wanted to come on to here, which is what I mentioned earlier about Stones, the 1972 album, early 70s anyway, Stones released. I think it's 71 because it come before Moods, I'm sure. Or is it the other way around? I can't remember. But the content chosen for the Stones album, I think, is fantastic. You know, Last Thing on My Mind, Husbands and Wives, Suzanne. I think it's going to rain today. What a performance that is. If You Go Away, brilliant. You know, there's not a bad apple in those. But you struggle to find a good apple in the covers here. And this one, again, it's just a bit too tame. And a little bit like The Good Lord Loves You, I can skip it. I can skip it quite easily. But in the context of the album and listening to it as it should be on an LP or a CD or all the way through is what I'm saying. It's okay. You know, it's okay, but it's okay enough to get a 5, but absolutely nothing more than that. Track number 8 then, we're getting through quite quickly, is I'm a Believer. And this is a bit of a, what's the word? A reimagining, sort of, a different composition to the track that Neil Diamond famously wrote for the Monkees in the mid-60s. And it's a revised track of additional lyrics. It's okay. Again, it's okay. It's really nothing more than that. It's a bit of an ill-advised track. It's trying here, which is what a lot of this album does, to go with the times. And that is another thing that, as I said a little bit earlier, would have the same criticism of Neil Diamond's 1986 album in parts, Headed for the Future, because it just tries too much to go to the time. If you look at albums that come before this, Beautiful Noise, as I said, Moods, Stones, even Serenade, they don't try and fit to a certain genre. It's a little bit all out there, but it works because that's Neil Diamond. This, though, tries to pan to that disco genre, tries to encapsulate that in these tracks, apart from September Morn, of course. And it's just an incredibly inconsistent record. And, again, this is okay, but it's not great. It isn't great. It's a 5 out of 10. Track number 9, the penultimate track of the album. And this is actually one of the better cover tracks. And this actually is a compliment. You wouldn't think so with how I've talked about some of the other covers, but it was written in the 60s, this one. The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore. Written in the 60s, and the Walker Brothers had the most popular version of this track. And what I wanted to discuss at the start again is a term called bookends. It was a Simon and Garfunkel album, and it's a perfect way to describe this album. I've spoken at length now about some of these tracks. Good Lord Loves You, Shelter Your Arms, I'm a Believer, being very ill-advised choices for cover tracks. But this is excellent. As I've said, just because it's a cover doesn't mean it's bad. I don't have to have every track written by Neil Diamond. Neil Diamond can cover tracks brilliantly. That was proven in his 2010 album Dreams, that it's got some incredible covers. Midnight Train to Georgia, Ain't No Sunshine. You know, really fantastic versions of those songs. So Neil Diamond can pull off a cover, believe me. And I took to this one straight away. I do think that this just gives Neil Diamond far better chance to display his vocal ability, and the arrangement's pretty good here as well. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10, which is actually, I think, the second best track on the album. There's nothing that goes above a 7. No, there isn't. The second best track on the album, and it's one I go back to quite often, and that's something I don't do a lot with this album, so it says a lot. And the final track is Sagar Lee. I'm going to give this one another 7 out of 10. It's actually another great choice, another cover track. It's a popular American folk song from the 1920s, and it's got quite a funky arrangement. Again, it does try to pander to the whole disco feel, but it actually works in this case, in my opinion. It's got a bit of a get up and go, but it doesn't force it too much. It doesn't become cheesy like Danced in the Street became. It's not the best track ever, but if you take this album with a bit of a pinch of salt and what it is, it's certainly more than listenable, and dare I say it for this track, actually quite enjoyable. It is. It's quite enjoyable. So you can certainly tell from those 10 tracks that it is a massively inconsistent album. There's some good pockets, but for the good, there's some incredibly bad pockets. And with all these album reviews, what I do, and I keep a chart of these as well, is I take an average of the ratings I've given to the 10 tracks and come out with a score that is out of 10. So this album comes out at a 6.4 out of 10. Now, that rating is helped massively by the title track. You know, if that was a 7 or 8, that would have been going down to 5 out of 10. As I said earlier, as a bit of a conclusion, very inconsistent, good in places, but very, very poor in others. And I think this, to answer the question that probably is in the title, I think this probably is the lowest point of Neil Diamond's career. I think that perhaps I'm Glad You're Here With Me Tonight is a strong rival to that. I'm not a fan of that album. You know, again, a few good tracks, a few duds similar to this. But you have to say his 80s stuff was far better, which is why this is the low period. I've talked a little bit about and mentioned a few times, Headed for the Future. But it's only really the title track that's a bit corny there. The Story of My Life, Love Doesn't Live Here Anymore, 2 brilliant tracks. But this album, it's a strange one. But I really wanted to just get this one out of the way, if you like. Review this one. Neil Diamond's one of my favourite artists, if not my favourite artist. And it is so hard for anything, I guess, that we love to criticise it. But that's what I like to do around here. Critical album reviews. And I'm glad we've got this one out of the way, because I listened to it last night, and it's fair to say this album will be going back in the wardrobe and probably not brought out very often. But let's see what you think in the comments. You might think it's good, and I've got absolutely no problem with that, because there are a lot of reviews I watch of albums, and they say similar things to me about different albums, and I'll go, what a load of rubbish, what a load of crap, I think that album's brilliant, and I have no problem with you doing that. But ultimately, this is my opinion, and I'd like to hear yours down in the comments as well. So that's going to be it for today's album review. If you've enjoyed that one, please leave a like down below. It really helps more people to see the videos, and my Neil Diamond stuff is doing really well at the moment. That's why you might see more videos on Neil Diamond than anybody else at the moment. Also, remember to leave a comment on what your thoughts are of this album, maybe your favourite track, least favourite track, and also, of course, to remember to subscribe for weekly album reviews, top 10s, not just Neil Diamond. I have a vast music taste, whether it's Neil Diamond, which I think falls into his own category, easy listening, pop, rock and roll, hard rock. I have a real vast music taste, so I'm sure that something around here will fit your tastes. But as I said, thank you very much for your company today. I hope you've enjoyed today's album review. I'd recommend giving this a spin, or a listen on Spotify, or however you consume your music, and then form an opinion. That's my opinion. I'd love to hear yours. Thank you for watching. I've been Toby from TIJ Music, and I'll see you all in the next video of mine. Goodbye for now.